My name is Alexandra Martinez, and at 32 years old, I never expected to be publicly fired in a crowded five-star restaurant. My manager Bradley called me incompetent, while clients watched in horror. As tears threatened, the distinguished gentleman at the next table approached. He handed me his business card. Maxwell Bennett, of Bennett Ventures. Incompetent people do not build what you built, he said firmly. My office, 9 a.m. Before I continue this story of how I turned my most humiliating moment into sweet victory, let me know where you are watching from and hit that like button if you have ever been underestimated at work. I have always been drawn to computers. Growing up in suburban Chicago, I started coding when I was 11 on an old desktop my parents bought secondhand. My bedroom walls were covered not with boy band posters but with sticky notes full of code snippets. While other girls my age were experimenting with makeup, I was experimenting with programming languages. By 17, I had created my first encryption program. Nothing professional but enough to secure acceptance to MIT with a partial scholarship. College was both exhilarating and terrifying. I was surrounded by brilliant minds, many from privileged backgrounds with private school educations. As a middle-class girl with public school experience, imposter syndrome hit me hard, but I refused to let insecurity stop me. I graduated with honors in computer science, specializing in cybersecurity. The job market, however, was less welcoming than I had hoped. 3 internships and dozens of interviews later, I landed at a small tech firm that paid barely enough to cover my student loans and rent for a tiny studio apartment. For 2 years, I worked 80-hour weeks, learning the industry and building my reputation. My breakthrough came when I developed a patch for a critical security vulnerability, saving the company from what could have been a devastating breach. That success caught the attention of Tech Fusion, a mid-sized cybersecurity firm with growing industry clout. When they offered me a senior developer position with a salary that finally reflected my skills, I jumped at the opportunity. The first 6 months were everything I had dreamed of professionally. My direct supervisor, Bradley Parker, seemed supportive and impressed by my ideas. He was in his mid-40s, had an MBA from Wharton, and spoke with the polished confidence of someone who knew how to navigate corporate waters. Alexandra, your approach to multi-layered authentication is exactly what we need, he told me during my first performance review. I think you could be on track for a leadership position if you continue this trajectory. His encouragement motivated me to work even harder. I began developing what I believed could revolutionize data protection. The cybersecurity world was struggling with increasingly sophisticated attacks, and traditional firewalls were proving insufficient. My idea involved a self-adapting protocol that could identify pattern anomalies before they manifested as threats. I called it the Adaptive Security Integration System, or ASIS. For months, I worked late into the night coding and testing endless iterations. Bradley seemed enthusiastic, stopping by my desk regularly to check on progress. This could be huge for Tech Fusion, he would say, looking over my shoulder at the code. Keep me updated on every development. I noticed the first red flag during a quarterly meeting with executive leadership. Bradley presented the concept of ASIS, without mentioning my name once. When the CFO asked who developed the concept, Bradley vaguely replied, "It was a team effort under my division." Later, when I confronted him privately, he seemed genuinely apologetic. "Alex, you know how these executives are. They respond better to management pitches. I was just playing the game to get your project approved. Next time, I will make sure to highlight your contribution." I wanted to believe him. The second incident was harder to excuse. Bradley asked me to prepare slides explaining ASIS for a major industry conference. I spent days perfecting the presentation only to discover I was not on the attendee list. Budget constraints, Bradley explained. We can only send one representative. And as department head, it makes sense for me to go. I will make sure you get full credit. When I watched the recorded presentation later, Bradley presented my slides verbatim, but framed the innovation as my department's breakthrough approach. My name appeared on a final acknowledgement slide alongside 10 other developers who had nothing to do with ASIS. The third incident was the most blatant. After I solved a particularly challenging security integration issue, Bradley invited me to a meeting with potential investors. 5 minutes before it began, his assistant informed me that the meeting had been reconfigured as executive level only. The next day, Bradley announced that he had secured $2 million in development funding based on his innovative security protocol. Despite these betrayals, I remained focused on the technology. Tech Fusion had resources I needed to fully develop ASIS, and I still believed in its potential to transform cybersecurity. I tried to ignore the increasingly toxic dynamics and channel my frustration into the code. The company culture did not help. Tech Fusion employed 78 developers, only 11 of whom were women. The leadership team was entirely male, creating an environment where technical brilliance often mattered less than political maneuvering. I watched other talented women leave, unable to advance despite their contributions. I told myself I would be different, that the quality of my work would eventually speak for itself. By the 18-month mark at Tech Fusion, ASIS was beginning to show remarkable results. In controlled tests, it detected and neutralized 97% of simulated attacks, significantly outperforming industry standards. I documented everything, meticulously aware that Bradley might try to claim exclusive credit. My breakthrough came on a Tuesday morning. After months of refinement, I solved the latency issues that had been hampering real-time response. ASIS could now detect, analyze, and respond to threats with negligible processing delays. This was the final piece needed to make the system commercially viable. Excitedly, I shared the news with Bradley, showing him the performance metrics. His reaction was not what I expected. Rather than enthusiasm, his expression showed something closer to alarm. "Good work," he said stiffly. "I need the complete documentation by tomorrow. We have a dinner with North Star Systems on Thursday. They are considering us for their security overhaul." North Star Systems was a major player in healthcare data management. Securing their contract would be a massive win for Tech Fusion. I spent the next 48 hours preparing comprehensive documentation, running additional tests, and refining my presentation. On Thursday morning, Bradley sent a company-wide email. "Pleased to announce that I will be presenting our new security protocol to North Star Systems tonight. This innovative approach, developed under my supervision, represents the future of Tech Fusion's security offerings." No mention of my name. No acknowledgement of my role. But I was still invited to the dinner, which I took as a positive sign. Perhaps in person, with the actual technical discussion, my contribution would become clear. I could not have been more wrong. La Maison was the kind of restaurant where the menus do not display prices. Located in the heart of downtown, it catered to corporate executives and wealthy clients who appreciated its private atmosphere and exceptional cuisine. When I arrived wearing my best black dress and the pearl earrings my grandmother had given me for graduation, I felt a flutter of nervous anticipation. This dinner represented more than a potential client. It was my opportunity to finally receive recognition for months of dedicated work. I had rehearsed technical explanations and prepared answers to potential questions. I was ready to impress. The maitre d' guided me to a private dining area, where Bradley and 4 representatives from North Star were already seated. I recognized their CEO, Richard Hammond, from industry publications. Bradley introduced me simply as Alexandra from our development team, before immediately steering the conversation back to himself. As I was saying, our approach to adaptive security represents a complete paradigm shift, he continued, barely acknowledging my arrival. Throughout the appetizer course, I waited for an opportunity to join the conversation. The North Star CTO asked several technical questions that Bradley answered with vague generalities. Twice, I tried to provide specific details only to have Bradley talk over me. "Alexandra is still learning the big picture," he said after one such interruption, offering an indulgent smile that made me feel like a child at the adults' table. By the main course, my frustration was building, but I maintained a professional demeanor. When Richard Hammond directly asked me about the authentication protocols, I seized the opportunity. "The system uses a triple-layer verification process," I began, "with biometric, behavioral, and contextual authentication working in concert too." "What Alexandra means," Bradley interrupted, "is that we have implemented my multi-factor approach, which I developed after recognizing the limitations of traditional methods." The North Star executives exchanged glances. They were not technical experts, but they could sense the tension at the table. I took a sip of water, trying to calm my rising anger. When the waiter cleared our plates, Bradley excused himself briefly. In his absence, Hammond turned to me. "Alexandra, You seem to have a strong grasp of the technical aspects. What was your involvement in developing this system? Before I could answer, Bradley returned. Something in his expression had changed. His previous false cordiality was replaced with cold determination. He remained standing as the waiter served dessert. Before we continue, he announced loudly, I need to address something important. The entire table looked up at him, including me. The surrounding tables of business diners quieted as his voice carried through the restaurant. Alexandra is no longer with Tech Fusion, effective immediately. The words hit me like a physical blow. For several seconds, I could not process what was happening. The North Star executives looked as shocked as I felt. I regret having to do this publicly. Bradley continued, his voice projecting to nearby tables, but I discovered significant issues with the security protocol just before dinner. Alexandra has misrepresented the capabilities of the system and introduced critical vulnerabilities that could have compromised client data. My face burned with humiliation as I realized every diner in our section was now watching. A woman at the next table was discreetly recording on her phone. That is not true. I managed to say, my voice barely audible. The evidence is conclusive. Bradley continued as if I had not spoken. We cannot present fraudulent solutions to valued partners like North Star. Fortunately, I will be personally overseeing corrections to ensure the integrity of our offering. Richard Hammond looked deeply uncomfortable. Perhaps this should be handled privately, Bradley. I apologize for the scene, Bradley replied smoothly, but transparency is core to Tech Fusion's values. I could not in good conscience proceed without disclosing this situation. My heart pounded so violently I could feel it in my fingertips. Tunnel vision narrowed my periphery as tears threatened to spill. Every eye in the restaurant seemed fixed on me, witnessing my professional execution. This is completely false, I said, finding my voice despite the trembling in my limbs. ASIS is my development. It works exactly as documented. Bradley's expression hardened. Security will meet you at the office tomorrow to collect your credentials. Please leave your laptop before departing. The instruction was clear. I was being dismissed from the table from the company from my own creation. With shaking hands, I gathered my purse and stood. My legs felt disconnected from my body as I pushed back my chair. I apologize for the disruption, I said to the North Star executives, summoning the last shreds of my dignity. What you have been told is untrue. Bradley's expression remained impassive. Security footage of you attempting to copy confidential files says otherwise. This new lie stunned me into silence. There was no such footage because I had done no such thing. But in that moment, surrounded by strangers witnessing my humiliation, I had no way to counter his fabrication. The walk from the table to the exit stretched eternally. Conversations halted as I passed. Silverware paused mid-air. A busboy nearly collided with me, then stepped quickly aside, avoiding eye contact. The maitre watched with practiced neutrality as I approached the door, my professional reputation disintegrating with each step. Outside, the cool evening air hit my flushed face. Tears finally escaped, tracking mascara down my cheeks. I fumbled for my phone to call a rideshare, struggling to see the screen through blurred vision. Everything I had worked for, everything I had built, had been stolen and weaponized against me in the span of 5 minutes. In that moment, I believed my career in cybersecurity was over. Who would hire me after such a public dismissal? How could I fight the resources of Tech Fusion if they claimed I had attempted to steal confidential information? The algorithms I had poured my soul into for 18 months now belonged to Bradley, along with any professional credibility I had established. As I waited for my ride, shivering despite the mild temperature, I could not imagine how I would recover from this devastation. I had no idea that the most important witness to my humiliation was about to change everything. During my public firing, I had been vaguely aware of a silver-haired man dining alone at the table adjacent to ours. Dressed in an impeccably tailored navy suit, he had seemed to be paying particular attention to our table as the scene unfolded. Now, as I stood on the sidewalk fighting back tears, I heard footsteps approaching. Mrs. Martinez. I turned to see the silver-haired gentleman standing a few feet away. His expression was difficult to read, but there was something like controlled anger in his eyes. Not directed at me, I realized, but at the situation he had witnessed. I could not help overhearing what just occurred, he said. Your former manager's claims about your security protocol seemed questionable to me. I wiped at my tears, embarrassed to be seen in such a vulnerable state. I am sorry, but this is not a good time. I understand completely. But before you leave, I wanted to mention that I found your brief explanation of the triple-layer authentication process particularly interesting, especially the behavioral component. That approach addresses vulnerabilities that most security firms have not even identified yet. His comment caught me off guard. This stranger had picked up on technical nuances that even the North Star executives had missed. Who was he? How do you know about behavioral authentication patterns? I asked. He smiled slightly. I make it my business to understand emerging technologies, particularly those with disruptive potential. He reached into his jacket and produced a business card, offering it to me. Maxwell Bennett. Bennett Ventures. I accepted the card automatically, then froze as I processed the name. Maxwell Bennett was legendary in the tech investment world. His venture capital firm had backed some of the most successful tech startups of the past decade. His reputation for identifying revolutionary technologies before they hit mainstream awareness was unparalleled. Mr. Bennett, Your former manager called you incompetent, he interrupted. But incompetent people do not build adaptive security systems with behavioral authentication components. He glanced back toward the restaurant entrance where Bradley and the North Star executives were now emerging. My office, 9 a.m. tomorrow. The address is on the card. With that, he turned and walked toward a waiting black car, leaving me speechless on the sidewalk. I looked down at the embossed card in my hand. Bennett Ventures with an address in the financial district and a direct phone number. My rideshare arrived moments later. During the 20-minute drive to my apartment, I fluctuated between crushing humiliation and bewildered hope. How had Maxwell Bennett recognized the technical significance of my brief comments? What could he possibly want to discuss tomorrow? When I entered my apartment, I immediately kicked off my heels and collapsed onto my sofa. The events at the restaurant played on repeat, in my mind each recollection bringing fresh waves of shame and anger. Bradley had not just fired me, he had deliberately destroyed my reputation in front of potential clients and industry peers. After allowing myself 30 minutes to cry, I washed my face and made a cup of strong tea. Then I opened my laptop and began researching Maxwell Bennett more thoroughly. What I found was impressive and intimidating. Bennett had started as a software engineer before transitioning to venture capital in his 30s. Over 20 years, he had built a portfolio worth billions. His investments consistently anticipated market shifts months or years before competitors. Bennett Ventures specialized in cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, and biotech, 3 fields with exponential growth potential. An article in Forbes described Bennett as pathologically allergic to mediocrity and brutally direct with founders who fail to meet his standards. Another profile mentioned his tendency to personally recruit overlooked technical talent from larger corporations. At 2 a.m., unable to sleep, I found myself typing Maxwell Bennett rescue into the search bar. The results were illuminating. Multiple successful CEOs credited Bennett with plucking them from obscurity after they had been sidelined or dismissed by previous employers. He seemed to have a talent for identifying undervalued innovators, particularly women and minorities who had been passed over for recognition. But alongside these success stories were cautionary tales. Bennett had high expectations and little patience for those who could not deliver on their potential. His support was not charity. It was strategic investment in talent he believed would generate returns. As dawn approached, my email pinged with a message from Tech Fusion Legal. The subject line read, "Termination and confidentiality reminder." The body contained formal notification of my termination for attempted intellectual property theft and misrepresentation of technical capabilities. It reminded me of the non-compete clause in my contract, which prohibited me from working on similar security technologies for 2 years. The email concluded with a thinly veiled threat of legal action should I attempt to misappropriate company-owned innovations. The message confirmed what I already suspected. Bradley was not just stealing my work. He was actively building a legal barrier to prevent me from continuing my research elsewhere. If I accepted Bennett's invitation, I could be inviting a lawsuit from Tech Fusion. I closed my laptop and watched the sunrise through my window. What choice did I really have? Return to small tech companies doing mundane coding work, except that 18 months of groundbreaking research now belong to someone else. Or take a risk on this unexpected opportunity, despite the potential legal complications. At 3 a.m., I made my decision. I would meet with Maxwell Bennett. I had nothing left to lose and possibly everything to gain. Morning arrived after barely 2 hours of restless sleep. I stood before my closet trying to decide what to wear to meet one of the most influential venture capitalists in the country. After several changes, I settled on a charcoal gray pantsuit, professional but not flashy. My confidence might be shattered, but I could at least look composed. Bennett Ventures occupied the top 5 floors of a sleek skyscraper in the financial district. The lobby featured 20-foot ceilings, marble floors, and a massive digital art installation tracking global technology innovation in real time. Security was tight, with both automated systems and attentive human guards. Alexandra Martinez for Maxwell Bennett, I told the receptionist at the security desk. 9 a.m. appointment. After verifying my identity and taking my photograph for a temporary badge, the receptionist directed me to a private elevator requiring keycard access. Mr. Bennett's office is on the 52nd floor. His assistant will meet you. The elevator ascended smoothly to a reception area that showcased Bennett Ventures' success without ostentation. Glass cases displayed early prototypes of now ubiquitous technologies they had funded. The walls featured digital screens scrolling through statistics and growth charts of portfolio companies. Several industry awards sat in modest display cases, including 3 consecutive Investor of the Year recognitions. I gave my name to the receptionist, who asked me to wait in a seating area furnished with ergonomic chairs and the latest digital magazines. Through floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the entire city spread below, making me acutely aware of the literal and figurative heights I had entered. After precisely 7 minutes, a young woman in a tailored blue dress approached. Miss Martinez, I am Amelia, Mr. Bennett's assistant. He is ready for you now. She led me through glass doors into a corridor lined with meeting rooms, each named after famous innovators. We passed rooms labeled Turing, Hopper, Tesla, and Curie before reaching a corner office with Bennett printed in simple font on the door. Maxwell Bennett's office was surprisingly minimalist given his wealth and status. A desk of polished walnut stood before windows offering panoramic city views. 2 mid-century modern chairs faced the desk, with a small conference table occupying one corner. The only decorations were architectural models of buildings that housed successful Bennett investments. Bennett rose from his desk as we entered. In daylight, I could better observe his appearance. Around 60, with silver hair and sharp blue eyes, he projected focused intelligence rather than intimidating power. He wore a simple white shirt, no tie, with his suit jacket hanging on a nearby coat rack. Miss Martinez, thank you for coming. He gestured to one of the chairs. Please have a seat. Can Amelia bring you coffee or tea? I requested black coffee, which arrived promptly in a simple white mug. After Amelia departed, closing the door behind her, Bennett leaned forward with his elbows on the desk. I imagine you have questions about why I asked you here. Several, I admitted. Starting with how you recognize the significance of my security protocol from just a few comments at dinner. Bennett smiled slightly. I was not at La Maison by coincidence. Bennett Ventures has been tracking TechFusion's security developments for months. Industry sources mentioned a promising adaptive security system being developed there. When I heard your brief explanation last night, I recognized elements that aligned with what my researchers had identified as the next necessary evolution in cybersecurity. This revelation startled me. You were there specifically to learn about ASUS. Not initially. I was meeting with banking clients and happened to be seated near your table. But when I overheard technical details, my attention shifted. Your approach to behavioral authentication particularly interested me. Bennett stood and walked to a touchscreen on the wall. With a few taps, he brought up a technical schematic that looked remarkably similar to my own design concepts for ASUS. 6 months ago, my research team identified these architectural approaches as theoretically optimal for next-generation security systems. We have been looking for development teams capable of implementing them. He turned to face me. Based on what I heard last night, I believe you have already built what we have only theorized. The realization that Bennett Ventures had independently validated my technical approach was vindicating. My work was not just good. It was cutting edge enough to have attracted attention from one of the most sophisticated investment firms in tech. Mr. Bennett, I appreciate your interest, but there are complications. Tech Fusion claims ownership of my work. They have already threatened legal action if I attempt to continue development elsewhere. Bennett returned to his seat. Yes, I anticipated that issue. Our legal team reviewed your situation overnight. Tech Fusion's position is problematic for several reasons. He slid a tablet across the desk, displaying a legal analysis. As I skimmed it, my eyes widened at the thoroughness of the overnight research. First, Bennett continued, our team found 3 published academic papers you wrote during graduate studies that outlined early concepts central to ASIS. This establishes prior intellectual foundation before your employment at Tech Fusion. I had nearly forgotten those papers. They contained theoretical frameworks that later evolved into key ASIS components. Second, Tech Fusion's non-compete clause is likely unenforceable given their termination method. Public humiliation and false accusations of intellectual property theft constitute potential grounds for constructive dismissal, which would invalidate restrictive covenants. Bennett tapped the tablet, bringing up another document. Third, and perhaps most interesting, Tech Fusion is currently competing for a $300 million government cybersecurity contract. The deadline for submission is in 6 weeks. I suspect your former manager's actions were motivated by desire to claim sole credit for ASIS before that submission. The pieces suddenly fit together. Bradley's increasing hostility, the rush to discredit me, the false accusations. He needed me eliminated before the government contract submission. Mr. Bennett, why are you telling me all this? What exactly are you proposing? I am offering you a position heading a new cybersecurity division at Bennett Ventures, with full creative control and resources to continue developing your adaptive security system. He named a salary that made me blink in surprise, plus equity in any resulting commercial applications. The offer was beyond generous. It was life-changing, but doubts lingered. What if Tech Fusion sues? What if they are right, and I cannot recreate my work without violating their intellectual property claims? Bennett's expression remained calm. Our legal team believes Tech Fusion's position is tenuous at best. As for recreation, we do not expect you to bring any proprietary code or documentation. We want your expertise and vision, not stolen materials. I hesitated, the memory of public humiliation still fresh. Mr. Bennett, while I appreciate this opportunity, I need to be honest. My confidence has been severely shaken. What if I cannot deliver what you expect? For the first time, Bennett's professional demeanor softened slightly. Miss Martinez, everyone in this building has failed at something. What defines them is how they responded to that failure. I am not investing in your past achievements. I am investing in your future potential. He stood again. Let me show you something before you decide. Bennett led me out of his office and down a corridor to a secure elevator requiring biometric authentication. We descended 3 floors to a space that contrasted sharply with the corporate atmosphere above. The doors opened onto a state-of-the-art development lab. Workstations with multiple monitors formed collaborative clusters. Glass-walled testing environments housed various security simulation setups. A dozen developers worked intensely at their stations or collaborated in small groups. This is our Advanced Security Solutions Lab, Bennett explained. Every resource needed to develop and test cutting-edge protection systems. And this, he gestured to an unoccupied corner section with 6 workstations, would be your team's area. I walked through the space examining the equipment. Every piece was top of the line, far superior to what I had worked with at Tech Fusion. One testing station included specialized hardware for running sophisticated penetration simulations that would have taken months to approve at my previous job. You already prepared this, I observed, before meeting me. Bennett nodded. As I mentioned, we have been looking for someone with your specific expertise. The space was ready for whomever we eventually found. It happens to be you. Standing in that lab, surrounded by technology that could help realize the full potential of my ideas, I felt something shift inside me. The humiliation and anger began to transform into determination. I could start over here with better resources and actual support. I could prove Bradley wrong in the most satisfying way possible by succeeding beyond what would have been possible at Tech Fusion. When can I start? I asked. Bennett extended his hand. How about right now? My first day at Bennett Ventures began with introductions to my new team. Bennett had assembled 5 developers specifically selected for expertise in different aspects of cybersecurity. Unlike the competitive atmosphere at Tech Fusion where information was hoarded for individual advancement, this team was structured for collaboration. Rachel Chen, a quantum cryptography specialist who had previously worked at DARPA, Marcus Washington with expertise in neural network security applications, Daria Kuznetsov, who had written 3 books on penetration testing methodologies, James Harrington, a former white hat hacker, recruited directly from college, and Jessica Morgan, the lead systems architect who would become my closest ally. We have been briefed on the general concept of adaptive security integration, Jessica told me during our first meeting, but we are eager to hear your vision directly. The contrast with Tech Fusion was striking. Here I was explicitly recognized as the conceptual lead. My ideas were not just acknowledged, but actively sought out. In our first team session, I outlined the core principles of ASIS, careful to build upon my published academic work, rather than Tech Fusion-specific implementations. The fundamental innovation I explained at the whiteboard is treating security not as a static barrier, but as an intelligent system that adapts to emerging threats in real time. For 3 hours, we discussed architectural approaches, potential vulnerabilities, and implementation strategies. No one interrupted me. No one claimed my ideas as their own. Instead, they built upon my foundation, suggesting refinements and extensions I had not considered. At the end of the day, Maxwell Bennett called me into a private meeting room. "Your team seems impressed," he observed. "How do you feel about day 1? Honestly overwhelmed, but in a good way." I hesitated before adding, "At Tech Fusion, I constantly had to fight for resources and recognition. This feels completely different." Bennett nodded. "That is by design. Innovation thrives with support, not obstacles." He slid a tablet across the table, displaying a news release. "You should be aware of this. Tech Fusion announced this morning." The headline read, "Tech Fusion to unveil revolutionary security protocol at National Cybersecurity Conference." A quote from Bradley Parker claimed credit for developing an adaptive security system that would transform industry standards. The conference was scheduled for 6 weeks later, aligning perfectly with the government contract submission deadline. My stomach tightened. He is going to present my work as his own. Presumably, Bennett agreed. Though the question is whether what he presents will actually work. Did you leave functional code behind? I considered this carefully. My personal development environment contained the most advanced version. The official Tech Fusion repository has a stable but limited implementation, missing several key components I was still refining. So they have something but not everything. Correct. But even with what they have, they could make a compelling demonstration, especially to non-technical observers. Bennett seemed unconcerned. Then we face a simple challenge. We need to build something better in 6 weeks. Better than what took me 18 months to develop at Tech Fusion, I asked incredulously. You now have superior resources, a dedicated team, and no corporate bureaucracy impeding progress. Plus, you understand the system architecture better than anyone. The question is whether you can rebuild the essentials and add the enhancements you were planning. His calm confidence was contagious. Maybe it was possible. I had spent months at Tech Fusion navigating approval processes and justifying resource requests. Here I could focus entirely on development. I will need complete documentation of my process, I said, thinking aloud, to establish independent development and protect against legal challenges. Bennett tapped his tablet. Already arranged. We have set up comprehensive version control with timestamps and authentication. Every line of code you write will be provably original work created at Bennett Ventures. Over the next 2 weeks, I worked with an intensity I had never experienced. My team proved exceptionally talented, each member contributing valuable perspectives. Jessica Morgan particularly impressed me with her ability to translate theoretical concepts into practical architectures. The behavioral authentication module is brilliant, she told me one evening as we worked late. But have you considered adding contextual awareness to the threat assessment matrix? Her suggestion led to a significant enhancement, making the system even more responsive to subtle attack patterns. This collaborative improvement epitomized the difference between Bennett Ventures and Tech Fusion. Here, enhancing my work was not threatening, it was the entire point. 3 weeks into development, we had recreated most of ASUS's core functionality and added several new features. Our testing showed performance metrics already exceeding what I had achieved at TechFusion. Maxwell Bennett received regular updates but never micromanaged our approach. Then came the news that heightened the stakes dramatically. Bennett called an urgent meeting one morning, his expression more serious than usual. Our intelligence sources report that TechFusion has accelerated their development efforts. They have assigned 14 developers to what they are calling the Adaptive Security Protocol. Bradley Parker is personally leading the team. I felt a surge of anxiety. Do they know I am working here? Almost certainly. Silicon Valley has few real secrets. Bennett displayed a presentation slide. They have also formally entered the competition for the government security contract, with their conference presentation scheduled just before ours. Jessica Morgan frowned. They are positioning themselves to claim first-mover advantage. If they present before us, they establish priority, even if our system is superior. Exactly, Bennett confirmed, which is why we need to consider our strategic approach carefully. The following days took on a new intensity. We transitioned to a 24-hour development cycle, with team members working in shifts to maintain continuous progress. I often stayed through multiple shifts, catching naps on the office sofa rather than going home. During this period, Jessica became more than a colleague. As we worked through technical challenges and strategic questions, a friendship formed based on mutual respect and shared determination. "Why do you push yourself so hard?" she asked me once, bringing coffee at 2 a.m. when everyone else had gone home. "This is more than a project to me," I admitted. "It is vindication, proof that I was never the problem at TechFusion." Jessica considered this, revenge through excellence. "Something like that." She smiled. "I like it. Much more satisfying than the alternatives." 4 weeks in, we received concerning information. One of Bennett's contacts at North Star Systems reported that TechFusion had demonstrated an early version of their security protocol. The performance metrics were impressive, suggesting they had managed to implement more of my original design than I had expected. How is this possible? I wondered aloud during our emergency team meeting. The version in their repository was missing critical components. Marcus Washington offered a theory. Could Parker have accessed your personal development environment, somehow recovered code you thought was private? The possibility was troubling. I had been careful with access controls, but as department head, Bradley would have had override privileges. Maxwell Bennett remained strategic. Whether they obtained your original code or recreated it independently is less important than our response. We need to move beyond replication to innovation. He was right. If TechFusion presented essentially the same system I had originally developed, our only advantage would come from extending and improving the concept. We shifted focus to the enhancements I had been planning but never implemented at TechFusion, plus new ideas generated by our team. As the conference approached, we prepared not just technically, but strategically. Bennett arranged for us to present immediately after TechFusion in the main conference hall. This positioning would allow us to directly address any claims they made about their system. The night before the conference, our team worked until midnight finalizing our demonstration. As the others departed, Jessica stayed behind. "Are you nervous about tomorrow?" she asked. Terrified, I admitted, but also strangely calm. For the first time, I will be presenting my own work under my own name with no one trying to take credit. Whatever happens, that feels like victory. Jessica squeezed my shoulder supportively. "Get some rest. Tomorrow will be your moment." As I left the building that night, I realized how profoundly my perspective had changed in just 6 weeks. The humiliation that had once threatened to destroy me had instead become the catalyst for something far better than I could have achieved at TechFusion. Whatever tomorrow brought, I was no longer the same person who had been publicly fired in that restaurant. The National Cybersecurity Conference occupied the entire convention center with thousands of industry professionals, government officials, and technology journalists in attendance. Corporate booths filled the exhibition hall, while specialized tracks offered presentations on everything from quantum encryption to supply chain vulnerabilities. The Advanced Security Innovations track, where both TechFusion and Bennett Ventures would present, was housed in the largest auditorium. With seating for 800 attendees, It would be filled to capacity for the highly anticipated security protocol presentations. I arrived early with Jessica and Maxwell Bennett, wanting time to prepare and calm my nerves. As we reviewed our presentation materials in a preparation room, Bennett offered last-minute guidance. Focus on the innovation, not the competition, he advised. This is about showcasing excellence, not exposing Tech Fusion's theft. I nodded, understanding his strategy. Direct accusations would seem petty and unprofessional. The technology should speak for itself. An hour before our scheduled time, we entered the auditorium to observe Tech Fusion's presentation. Finding seats near the back, we watched as Bradley Parker took the stage to enthusiastic applause. He looked confident in an expensive suit, with perfect camera-ready hair and the practiced smile of someone accustomed to public speaking. Today, I am proud to present Tech Fusion's adaptive security protocol. He began a revolutionary approach to cybersecurity developed by our expert team. The familiar rage bubbled inside me as he launched into what was essentially my original ACES presentation. The slides, the terminology, even the example scenarios were clearly derived from my work. I gripped the armrests of my seat, focusing on controlling my breathing. Jessica leaned close. Notice the implementation gaps. They have the structure, but missed key integration points. She was right. As Bradley demonstrated the system, I could identify several areas where their implementation fell short of my original design. They had the framework but lacked the subtle optimizations that made ACES truly adaptive. During the technical demonstration, their system successfully blocked standard attack patterns but struggled with more sophisticated threat simulations. Bradley glossed over these limitations, emphasizing theoretical capabilities over actual performance. Their version is perhaps 70% effective compared to ours, Bennett whispered. Good enough to impress non-technical observers but fundamentally flawed. When Bradley concluded, the audience responded with appreciative applause. Several government representatives in the front row took extensive notes, confirming my suspicion that this presentation was aimed directly at the upcoming contract decision. As Tech Fusion's team left the stage, we moved to the preparation area. Through the curtain, I could see Bradley accepting congratulations from conference organizers. Our eyes met briefly, and his expression shifted from triumph to concern as he recognized me. Before I could react, he approached our group. Alexandra, surprising to see you here. Is it? I replied evenly. I would think my presence was predictable once you decided to present my work. Bradley's forced smile remained fixed. Your former work, you mean? Work you abandoned when you violated company confidentiality policies. Maxwell Bennett stepped forward. Miss Martinez will be presenting next. I suggest you stay to watch. You might learn something about proper implementation of adaptive security principles. Bradley's eyes narrowed as he recognized Bennett. Bennett Ventures. I should have guessed. He turned back to me. Careful, Alexandra. Tech Fusion protects its intellectual property vigorously. As do we, Bennett replied calmly. Particularly when that property is legitimately developed by our team. With a final warning look, Bradley departed to join his colleagues in the audience. My hands trembled slightly as I reviewed my presentation slides one last time. He is attempting to intimidate you, Bennett observed. That suggests he recognizes the vulnerability in their position. The conference moderator approached. Bennett Ventures, you are on in 5 minutes. Jessica squeezed my arm supportively. You have got this, Alex. Your system speaks for itself. Taking several deep breaths, I visualized successful presentations I had given in graduate school. I reminded myself that I knew this technology better than anyone in the auditorium, including Bradley Parker. When the moderator announced Alexandra Martinez, Chief Security Architect at Bennett Ventures, I walked onto the stage with forced confidence. 800 faces looked back at me, including the Tech Fusion team seated prominently in the second row. Good afternoon. I began, my voice steadier than I expected. Today I am presenting the Adaptive Security Integration System, or ACES, a next-generation approach to cybersecurity. For the next 20 minutes I detailed the architectural innovations that made ACES unique. I explained the triple-layer authentication system, the behavioral analysis matrix, and the contextual threat assessment framework, each component built upon concepts from my published academic work, establishing clear lineage predating my time at Tech Fusion. The key innovation in ASIS, I explained, is not just identifying known threats, but adapting to emerging attack patterns before they can be fully deployed. Throughout the presentation, I never mentioned Tech Fusion directly. Instead, I focused on how ASIS represented an evolution beyond conventional security approaches. The contrast with Bradley's presentation would be obvious to anyone with technical understanding. When I reached the demonstration portion, Jessica joined me on stage to assist. Together, we ran ASIS through a series of increasingly sophisticated attack simulations, including several that had caused Tech Fusion's system to falter earlier. Now we will subject ASIS to a zero-day exploit attempt, I announced, referring to an attack utilizing previously unknown vulnerabilities. This was a test Bradley had carefully avoided. The audience watched intently as our system detected the subtle behavioral anomalies that signaled the attack, implemented countermeasures, and preserved system integrity. Real-time performance metrics displayed on screen showed 99.4% threat neutralization with minimal processing latency. The technical portion of the audience broke into spontaneous applause. Even journalists who typically maintained professional detachment looked impressed. I caught Bradley shifting uncomfortably in his seat, conferring urgently with his colleagues. During the question and answer session, a senior government official raised his hand. Ms. Martinez, your presentation shows remarkable similarities to Tech Fusion's adaptive security protocol. Can you address the relationship between these systems? This was the moment I had been preparing for. I could see Bradley tensing, likely expecting accusations or claims of theft. Both systems appear to share certain foundational principles, I acknowledged diplomatically. This is not surprising, as those principles derive from academic research I published during my graduate studies at MIT prior to my employment at any company. I displayed citations to my 3 published papers with dates clearly visible. What distinguishes ASIS is the implementation architecture, particularly the integrated behavioral authentication system and contextual threat assessment matrix. These components enable the superior performance metrics you observed in our demonstration. The official nodded, satisfied with the professional response, but Bradley was not ready to concede. Ms. Martinez worked at Tech Fusion until recently, he interjected from his seat. Our protocol was developed under my supervision during that period. The similarities suggest improper use of proprietary information. Maxwell Bennett, who had been observing silently from the side, stepped forward. If I may address that concern. Bennett Ventures maintains comprehensive development documentation demonstrating independent creation of all ASIS components. We would be happy to provide this documentation to interested parties under appropriate confidentiality agreements. A technical journalist raised another challenging question. The behavioral authentication component seems particularly advanced. How does ASIS implement this without creating unacceptable latency? This was my area of deepest expertise, the problem I had solved during my final weeks at Tech Fusion. For 10 minutes, I explained the mathematical optimizations and algorithmic innovations that allowed real-time behavioral analysis without performance degradation. The technical elegance of the solution was undeniable, drawing appreciative nods from security experts in the audience. By the end of our 90-minute session, the contrast between presentations was stark. While Tech Fusion had shown a partially implemented system with theoretical capabilities, Bennett Ventures had demonstrated a fully functional solution with superior performance metrics and deeper technical innovation. As we concluded, the conference organizer announced a 30-minute break before the next presentation. Immediately, journalists and industry representatives surrounded our team, asking for additional details and contact information. Government officials requested private demonstrations and technical documentation. Through the crowd, I glimpsed Bradley being summoned by several Tech Fusion executives who had been watching from the back of the auditorium. Their expressions conveyed unmistakable displeasure as they escorted him from the hall for what appeared to be an uncomfortable conversation. Maxwell Bennett navigated through the crowd to reach me. Exceptional presentation, Alexandra. Clear, technically precise, and diplomatically handled. He gestured toward a side door. The government contract evaluation team has requested a private meeting. They were particularly impressed by your performance metrics. As we moved toward the meeting room, Jessica caught up with us. Alex, congratulations. And you might want to see this. She showed me her tablet displaying a breaking news alert from a technology publication. Bennett Ventures demonstrates superior security implementation. Questions raised about tech fusion claims. For the first time since that humiliating night at La Maison, I felt completely vindicated, not through accusations or legal battles, but through demonstrable technical excellence. I had rebuilt my work, improved upon it, and presented it under my own name before the entire industry. The government meeting lasted 45 minutes, during which the evaluation team asked detailed technical questions about implementation requirements. Their interest was evident, particularly regarding the behavioral authentication component that Tech Fusion had struggled to demonstrate effectively. As we left the meeting, Bennett received a call. After a brief conversation, he turned to me with a satisfied expression. That was our contact in procurement. Bennett Ventures has been selected as the primary vendor for the government security contract. $300 million over 5 years. The news took a moment to fully register. We had not just vindicated my work. We had secured one of the largest cybersecurity contracts in the industry, beating Tech Fusion at what had clearly been Bradley's ultimate goal. Your former manager just lost his company a $300 million contract by trying to claim credit for your work, Bennett observed with quiet satisfaction. Poetic justice at its finest. Standing in that convention center hallway surrounded by my new team and recognized for my true contributions, I experienced a sense of professional fulfillment unlike anything in my previous career. The public humiliation that had seemed devastating 6 weeks earlier had become the unlikely catalyst for my greatest success. 3 months after the National Cybersecurity Conference, Bennett Ventures' security division had grown from 6 people to 23. As division head, I led the implementation of ASIS for our government client, while simultaneously developing commercial applications for private sector deployment. My office on the 48th floor offered the same panoramic views as Maxwell Bennett's, though on a slightly smaller scale. The wall displayed framed copies of my original academic papers alongside the cover of Cybersecurity Today magazine, featuring my photograph and the headline Alexandra Martinez Security Innovator Reshaping Industry Standards. The professional recognition was gratifying, but more meaningful was the culture I had established within my division. Drawing from my experience at Tech Fusion, I created an environment where collaboration trumped competition and credit was scrupulously attributed to the appropriate team members. Jessica Morgan had been promoted to Deputy Division Head, reflecting her exceptional contributions to ASIS development. Our friendship had deepened through shared challenges and successes, providing personal as well as professional support during my ongoing recovery from the Tech Fusion experience. The new behavioral prediction module passed all test scenarios, she reported during our morning meeting. Marcus thinks we can deploy to production next week. Excellent. Make sure his name is prominently featured in the release documentation, I replied. His mathematical optimizations deserve recognition. The emotional healing had been gradual but steady. For weeks after the conference, I experienced occasional nightmares about the public firing, waking with the same burning humiliation I had felt that night. Over time, these episodes diminished in frequency and intensity. Professional success proved a powerful antidote to lingering self-doubt. Maxwell Bennett had become a valued mentor, offering guidance on both technical and leadership challenges. During one of our regular lunches, he shared information about Tech Fusion's aftermath. Bradley Parker has been reassigned, he told me. No longer heading development or presenting at conferences. Apparently losing a $300 million contract has consequences. I was surprised by my reaction to this news. 6 months earlier, I would have felt vindictive satisfaction. Now I felt something closer to indifference. Bradley's career trajectory no longer affected my sense of worth or vindication. Interesting, but not particularly relevant to our work, I replied. Bennett smiled slightly. That is precisely the right perspective. Success is your best response to past mistreatment. My experience had generated unexpected opportunities to help others. When a junior developer from another company approached me at an industry event, tearfully describing a similar experience of having her work claimed by a supervisor, I was able to offer both practical advice and emotional reassurance. This interaction inspired what became one of my most meaningful initiatives at Bennett Ventures. With Maxwell's support, I established an incubator program specifically for overlooked technical talent, particularly women and minorities who had experienced barriers to recognition. Innovation acceleration, provided mentorship resources and potential funding to developers with promising ideas but limited institutional support. The program's first cohort included 11 participants whose circumstances resonated with my own experience. The point is not just identifying undervalued talent, I explained during the program launch. It is creating pathways for that talent to receive proper attribution and opportunity. The professional media took note of the initiative, with several publications highlighting the program as an example of positive cultural change in the technology sector. What had begun as my personal redemption story was evolving into a broader movement addressing systemic issues I had experienced firsthand. On the anniversary of my firing at La Maison, I returned to the restaurant for dinner, this time as the host rather than the humiliated guest. I reserved a private dining room for my team to celebrate our division's first-year achievements. The symmetry of the location was not lost on my colleagues, though I had never shared the full details of that night with most of them. As we enjoyed excellent food and reflected on our accomplishments, I found myself contemplating the strange path that had led to this moment. The public humiliation that had seemed catastrophic had ultimately propelled me toward greater opportunity, recognition, and impact than would have been possible at Tech Fusion. After dinner, Jessica and I stepped onto the restaurant's terrace for a moment of quiet conversation. 1 year ago tonight, right in this building, I thought my career was over. I told her something I had never verbalized so directly. I could not imagine recovering from that level of professional humiliation. And now you are leading one of the most respected security teams in the industry, she observed. With a $300 million government contract and commercial partnerships with 5 Fortune 100 companies. I nodded, looking out at the city lights. The lesson was not what I expected. I thought success would feel like revenge, like proving Bradley wrong. But it is not about him at all anymore. It is about building something valuable and creating opportunities for others. That is real success, Jessica agreed. Not just personal vindication, but positive impact. The journey from devastation to triumph had taught me lessons I now shared with the participants in our incubator program. Technical excellence matters, but resilience matters more. Attribution should be guarded, but not at the expense of collaboration. And sometimes professional setbacks, even devastating ones, can redirect you to far better opportunities. Most importantly, I learned that true professional vindication comes not from proving critics wrong, but from building something so undeniably valuable that their opinions become irrelevant. The best revenge was not just personal success, but creating a better environment where others could succeed as well. As we approach the end of this story, I hope my experience offers encouragement to anyone facing workplace injustice or professional betrayal. Your expertise cannot be truly stolen if you have the courage to rebuild and improve upon it. And sometimes public humiliation can become the unexpected catalyst for your greatest triumph. Have you ever experienced someone taking credit for your work? How did you handle it? Share your story in the comments below. And if this journey of professional redemption resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need this reminder that setbacks can lead to unexpected opportunities. Thank you for joining me on this journey from fired to hired, from humiliation to triumph. Remember, your greatest success might be waiting just beyond your most difficult moment.